Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Good Clean Commander. I'm Ken, and
I'm MTG or Ashley.
yes, so today we actually have a cEDH game, first on the channel. So, Ash, you were part of it. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, just thought it would be fun to record my first cEDH game that I ever played. And huge shout out to the Commander Paradise group. They do a really fun podcast for Commander content. I highly recommend checking them out, and we'll put their information in the details below. But basically, Ryan and Tyler were my mentors in this because I think Kenya and I hadn't played cEDH before. We weren't really sure how we felt about it. And so, Tyler and Ryan, being the awesome people that they are, were like, hey, just pick a deck that looks cool to you and we'll just walk you through it. So today we have Aaron from our other Good Clean Commander episodes, and then it's myself, and then again, Ryan and Tyler from the Commander Paradise. So, yeah.
Yes, I was too scared to play cEDH, so I am not in this episode.
Also, I would love if y'all would be a little forgiving to me, because going back and editing, I'm like, I think I made some misplays there that I definitely shouldn't have done. So it's definitely a learning experience this time. But I think it's still a fun game to watch regardless. But yeah.
Yep.
Well.
But aside from that, I think we just have one thing left to say.
Which is?
Let's go have a good
clean game. We remembered. Aaron is playing Winota, Joiner of Forces. This commander wants to attack with non-human creatures to trigger Winota's ability and put human creatures onto the board for free. This commander can easily snowball out of control. And in Aaron's starting hand, he has a Phoenix Chick, Ragavan, Nimble Pilfer, Lena, Selfless Champion, Soul Ring, Arnie Metalbrow, Battlefield Forge, and a Terramorphic Expanse. Ryan is playing Urza, Lord Artificer. This deck wants to use Winter Orb and Tanglewire to lock down opponent's mana and allow Ryan to go for the win with the Hullbreaker Horror and Polymorph combo. And in his starting hand, he has a Lotus Petal, Chain of Vapor, Sapphire Medallion, Mystical Tutor, Offer You Can't Refuse, and Muddle the Mixture. I am playing Birgi, God of Storytelling. This Storm deck is a list I pulled from the database since I had no idea how to build a cEDH deck. And a huge thank you to Sean B2 for sharing this list and providing a detailed primer. The two main Storm combos in this deck are using Grinning Ignis with Birgi or with Karik's Bad Luck combo. More details in the primer, because I am bad at explaining it. And in my starting hand, I have a Jeweled Lotus, Soul Ring, Mox Opal, Mana Vault, Crystal Vein, Faithless Looting, and a Helm of Awakening. Tyler is playing Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow. This tempo deck wants to use their commander's ability to gain card advantage and try to win with Thassa's Oracle and Tainted Pack or Demonic Consultation combos. And in his starting hand, he has an Underground Sea, Mox Diamond, Marsh Flats, Spectral Sailor, Null Rod, an Offer You Can't Refuse, and a Watery Grave. Aaron starts off the game by drawing and plays a Battlefield Forge as land for turn. He then pays 1 life to create a red mana and cast Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. Aaron then passes the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws and plays a Lotus Petal and then passes the turn to me. I draw and play a Crystal Vein as land for turn. I then follow that up by playing a Jeweled Lotus and sacrifice it immediately to cast my commander, Birgi, God of Storytelling. I then play a Lotus Petal of my own, and this creates me 1 floating red mana on cast thanks to my commander's ability. I then use Crystal Vein for a colorless mana to cast Soul Ring, giving me 2 floating red mana. I then use 1 of the floating red mana for a Mana Vault, giving me a total of 2 floating mana again. Using my other red mana, I cast Faithless Looting, drawing 2, and as part of the spell's cost, I discard Helm of Awakening and Chromatic Star. Back at 2 floating mana, I then cast Chromox, creating a 3rd floating mana, and as part of its imprint cost, I cast Exile Overmaster, allowing Mox to tap for red mana. Now empty-handed, I let my floating mana fade and pass the turn to Tyler. Tyler draws for turn and plays an Underground Sea. He then plays Mox Diamond, discarding a Marsh Flats. He then passes the turn to Aaron. Aaron untaps draws and plays a Terramorphic Expanses land for turn. He sacrifices it to put a tapped plains into play, and then moving to combat, Aaron swings Ragavan at Ryan for 2 damage. Having no response, Ryan takes the 2. Ragavan triggers after doing damage to a player, and Aaron creates a treasure token. Ryan then exiles a Fabricate. Aaron leaves Fabricate in exile and casts a Soul Ring using the treasure created by Ragavan. With that, he passes the turn to Ryan. Ryan untaps, draws, and doesn't top deck a land, so then he passes the turn to me. I untap, draw, and pay 3 to flashback Faithless Looting, creating 1 red floating mana. Drawing 2, I discard Tormenting Voice and Pyroblast. Using the floating mana, I cast Ancestral Anger, targeting Birgi to draw a card, creating another floating mana. Using the other floating mana, I cast Conjurer's Bauble. Now back to 1 floating red mana, I then tap and sacrifice the Conjurer's Bauble to put Pyroblast on the bottom of my library to draw a card. I then play a tapped Dwarven Ruins. I then pass the turn to Tyler. On my end step, Tyler flashes in Spectral Pirate. Tyler then untaps, draws, and shocks in a Watery Grave, paying 2 life for it to enter untapped. Going to combat, Tyler swings Spectral Pirate at Aaron for 1 damage in the air. Having no response, Aaron is unable to block, allowing Tyler to use Yuriko's Ninjutsu ability. Since Yuriko dealt combat damage to a player, she triggers and Tyler reveals the top card of his library. It's a mana confluence, so each of his opponents takes 0 damage, and Tyler puts the card into his hand. Tyler then passes to Aaron. Aaron untaps, draws, and plays a Plains. Deciding it's time to get spicy, Aaron takes 1 damage and creates a red floating mana to cast Winota. We have no response, so Winota resolves, and moving to combat, Aaron swings Ragavan at Tyler. This triggers Winota, and Aaron looks at the top 6 cards of his library and puts Boromir, Warden of the Tower, into play tapped and attacking me. I take the 3 damage from Boromir, and Tyler takes 2 from Ragavan. Ragavan triggers, and Tyler exiles Cover of Darkness off the top of his library. Using the treasure token from Ragavan and tapping a Plains, Aaron casts Cover of Darkness from exile. While it's on the stack, Ryan sacks his Lotus Petal to cast an Offer You Can't Refuse, countering Cover of Darkness. Aaron makes 2 treasure tokens as part of the cost for an Offer You Can't Refuse, and then using one of those treasures, Aaron casts a Phoenix Chick. Then passes the turn to Ryan. Ryan untaps, draws, and plays a tapped Saffrazan Scary, which enters the battlefield with 2 depletion counters. Having no other plays, Ryan passes to me. I untap, draw, and pay 4 for an Experimental Frenzy, which lets me look at the top card of my library at any time and play lands or cast spells. On cast, Birgi triggers, and I have 1 floating red mana. I then use the floating mana to cast Winds of Change. Since I have no cards in hand, I shuffle my library while each opponent shuffles their hands into their library and draws equal to what was in their hand. In response, Tyler casts Spectral Sailor. I then continue my turn and use the 1 floating red mana to cast Sensei's Divining Top. Using Dwarven Mines to pay the cost, I activate Sensei's Divining Top to look at the top 3 cards of my library and arrange them in any order. I then tap Sensei's Divining Top to draw a card and put it back on top of my library. I was pretty overwhelmed with figuring out my cards, so I forgot to put it back on top of my library, but I would have been able to recast it anyways with the floating red mana from earlier and also replace the mana cost. I then cast March of Reckless Joy, where X is equal to 4. I exile the top 4 cards, which are Snow-Covered Mountain, City of Traders, Ragavan, and Rob the Archives from my library. I cast Ragavan first and decide to hold off casting Rob the Archives until my next turn. Letting my floating mana fizzle out, I pass to Tyler. Tyler untaps, draws, and plays a Gemstone Cavern as land for turn. He then moves to combat, swinging Yuriko at Ryan and Spectral Sailor at me. Unable to stop a flyer, I declare no blocks. Tyler ninjutsus in a Mist Syndicate Naga, and on damage, Tyler creates a copy of Mist, and I take 3 damage. Ryan has no response or block, so Yuriko triggers twice from both ninjas, dealing combat damage to players. Tyler reveals a Sakashima student, and each opponent takes 4 damage. He then reveals a Thieves Guild Enforcer, and now each opponent takes 1. Aaron goes down to 32 life, Ryan's at 32 as well, and I am at 29. He then passes the turn to Aaron. Aaron untaps, draws, and pays 3 for Theoden, King of Rohan. On ETB, Theoden is able to give double strike to another creature until end of turn and gives it to Ragavan. He then follows that up by paying 4 to cast Eowyn Fearless Knight targeting Yuriko. So editor's note here, Eowyn Fearless Knight can only target a creature with greater power than them. Therefore, Yuriko was not a valid target. However, this does not change the outcome of the game. Back to the game. So, until end of turn, Aaron's legendary creatures gain protection from black and blue since Yuriko had both in their color identity. And then using Theoden's ability, Eowyn gains double strike until end of turn. Going to combat, Aaron sends Eowyn at Tyler, Ragavan at Ryan, and Phoenix Chick at me. On attack, Winota triggers twice. For the first trigger, Aaron puts Eomer, King of Rohan into play attacking me, and it enters with 5 counters due to its ETB ability and directs 7 damage at me, and I go down to 22 life. He also must select another player to become the monarch and gives it to Ryan. Editor's note here, Eomer should have been at 4 counters and 5 damage because they do not include themselves for their ETB, and Sanctifier and Vec also entered the battlefield after Eomer, so it should have not been included in the initial count, but oh well, doesn't change the outcome of the game. The second trigger, Aaron puts a Sanctifier and Vec into play attacking me. On ETB, Aaron exiles all red and black cards from graveyards. Then, Theoden also triggers, and Aaron gives double strike to Sanctifier and the Phoenix Chick. Moving to damage, Ryan can't block Ragavan and takes combat damage. Again, since Ragavan had double strike, it deals 2 separate instances of combat damage to Ryan and triggers twice. Ryan exiles a Mystic Sanctuary and Gitaxian Probe and goes down to 24 life. I take 2 damage from the Phoenix Chick and 6 from Sanctifier for a total of 8. To not take lethal, I block Eomer with Ragavan and go down to 14 life. Tyler then takes 6 from Eowyn, going to 32. Aaron becomes the monarch and then draws at end step when he passes to Ryan. Ryan untaps, draws, and plays an island as land for turn. He then casts a Soul Ring, removing a depletion counter from the Saprazan Scary for 2 floating blue mana, and casts Urza. On ETB, Urza makes a construct that gets +1/+1 for each artifact he controls, which at this moment is 2. He then passes the turn to me. I untap, draw, and play a mountain that I exiled last turn with Reckless Joy. Realizing Moxfield untapped Mana Vault, I retap it real quickly and take the 1 damage as part of its upkeep trigger. I then use Crystal Vein to activate Sensei's Divining Top's ability to look at the top 3 cards of my library. I then tap Sensei's Divining Top to put it on top of my library and draw a card. I then pay 4 to cast Treasonous Ogre, floating a red mana. Paying 2 with 2 lands and a floating mana, I cast Imperial Intruder, which allows me to tutor for a creature card with power 2 or less and put it onto the battlefield. Unsure what to tutor for since I wasn't sure about the win con for the deck, Ryan and Tyler help me out like the homies they are, and Ryan suggests grabbing Grinning Ignis for part of the combo. Appreciating both their help, I put Grinning Ignis into my hand. Looking at the top card of my library with the Experimental Frenzy, I then play a Scalding Tarn off the top of my library, and editor's note, I think I was just really overwhelmed and super sleepy and couldn't remember that I had just played a land for turn, so please forgive me if it looks like I'm a cheater pumpkin eater here, but basically I wasn't supposed to make an additional land drop here. So back to the game, I pay 1 life to grab a mountain and, shuffle the library for free because I'm hoping to cast other things off the top of my library. I then follow that up by using my Lotus Petal, floating a mana, and a mountain to play Grinning Ignis. Moving to my end step, my Rob the Archives is exiled forever. Tyler also has an action on my end step and flashes in our friend that we've never seen before, Spectral Sailor. Then Tyler starts his upkeep and draws. Going right to combat, Tyler swings Spectral Sailor at Aaron. Aaron has no response or blocks. After no blocks are declared, Tyler ninjutsus in his commander Yuriko, and before damage is dealt, Tyler then pays 1 mana and 2 life to cast Vampiric Tutor. Damage then resolves and Yuriko triggers. Tyler reveals the card he tutored for, and it was a Demonic Consultation. Each opponent takes 1 damage. Aaron goes to 30 life, Ryan goes down to 27, and I go down to a spoopy 11 life. Tyler also becomes the monarch and moves to end step where he draws. Since he has more than 7 cards in hand, Tyler discards a Submerged and passes to Aaron. Aaron untaps, draws, and plays a Plains as land for turn. He then pays 5 for a Geist Honored Monk, which its attack power and toughness is equal to the number of creatures on the board. This also triggers Theoden, and Aaron gives Ragavan double strike again. Going to combat, Aaron swings the Sanctifier at me, and then remembers to make his 2/1/1 Flying Spirit tokens from the Geist Honored Monk trigger on their ETB, so we pause for that, and then resuming combat, he swings Phoenix Chick at Tyler and Ragavan at Ryan. On attack, this triggers Winota twice, and Aaron puts Lena, Selfless Champion, into play, and on ETB, he makes a 1/1 White Soldier token for each creature he controls, which is 10. Theoden then triggers, and Aaron gives the Phoenix Chick double strike. For the second Winota trigger, Aaron hits Evangel of Heliod, and when this ETBs, Aaron makes soldier tokens equal to his devotion to white, which is 13 for a total between Lena and this wonderful little bugger, 23 soldier tokens that hit the board this turn. Theoden triggers another time when Evangel ETBs, and he gives Lena double strike. He then sends both Evangel and Lena at Tyler. Now going to damage, Ryan declares no blocks and takes the Ragavan attacks, going to 23 life. And since Ragavan was given double strike, they trigger twice because of the separate combat instances, and Ryan exiles Jeweled Lotus along with Mox Opal. I can't block Sanctifier because it has protection from red, and I take 2 going to 9 life. Spooky. Tyler blocks Lena with his Naga copy and takes 3 damage from the Phoenix Chick in the air and the Evangel. Second main phase, Aaron casts the Jeweled Lotus and leaves the Mox Opal in exile since he didn't have a land in his hand to discard. Aaron then passes the turn. Ryan untaps, draws, and plays an island. He then makes 6 mana by sacrificing his Saprozen Scary and also exiles 2 cards to pay the delve cost to dig through time. Looking at the top 7 cards of his library, he picks 2 and puts the rest on the bottom of his library. He then passes the turn to me. I untap, draw, and take 1 damage from Mana Vault. I then pay 3 to cast Ignite the Future to exile the top 3 cards of my library, and until the end of my next turn, I can cast them. I hit into Infernal Plunge, Chromatic Sphere, and Pyrite Spellbomb. Using the floating red mana from Birgi's ability, I cast the Chromatic Sphere, which then creates another red floating mana that I use to cast Pyrite Spellbomb, then creating another red floating mana from Birgi's ability. I then cast Infernal Plunge, sacking the Imperial Recruiter to create 3 additional floating red mana for a total of 4. I then play a Mountainous Land for turn from the top of my library thanks to Experimental Frenzy's ability. I then cast Wheel of Misfortune using 3 out of the 4 of my floating mana. I now have a total of 2 since Wheel netted me another floating mana. Each opponent selects a number, and whoever didn't select the lowest discards their hand and draws a new 7. Basically, if you don't want to discard your hand, you'll want to pick 0. I really want to discard my hand, so I pick 7, and everyone else liked what they had, so they pick 0. And since I pick 7, I lose 7 life, going down to 1. I then pay using 2 floating mana to cast Thrill of Possibility to discard a card and draw 2. I discard a Mox Amber because it'll get countered by Boromir. This puts me at 1 floating red mana, and then I use 3 mana with my floating mana and tap into lands to cast Valakut Awakening. I put 6 cards on the bottom of my library and draw a fresh new 7. I use a floating mana to cast Dragon's Rage Chandler. I follow that up by paying 1 to cast Haggle to discard a card and draw a card. I discard Cloudstone Curio. Counting up how many cards I have discarded this turn, I determine it was 3 cards. I then use 1 floating mana to tap a land to cast a Pyrite Ritual and generate 3 more floating red mana for a total of 4. Trying to find the line and regretting that I discarded the Helm of Awakening early game, I keep going. I pay 4 mana to cast Change of Fortune to discard my hand and draw a card for each card I discarded this turn. I discard Deflecting Swat, Reiterate, and Karak the Thumbless to draw 6 cards. At 1 floating mana, I use it to cast Desperate Ritual to add 3 more floating mana to the pool for a total of 4 thanks to Birgi giving me 1 more floating mana. Knowing it'll get countered by Boromir, I cast Rograk, son of Roga for 0 mana, looking to gain an additional floating mana, going to 5. Currently, at Infinite Stormcast with Greening Ignis, I decide to cast Sensei's Divining Top using a floating mana. While editing this, I realized how lucky I was that I drew it again after accidentally shuffling it back into my library earlier when I had cast Imperial Recruiter. Now, at 5 floating mana, I then use 2 of the mana to cast Burning Prophet, netting 4 floating mana. Tyler then helps me out by saying I can put Sensei's Divining Top back on top of my library to draw a card, and then when I cast it, Burning Rune Prophet will allow me to scry 1, and Sensei's Divining Top will let me draw a card, and Experimental Frenzy will let me cast spells from the top of my library to keep the loop going. He explains that I can continue to do this until I draw into Aether Flux Reservoir and cast it. As long as I maintain mana to return and recast Greening Ignis, I can gain enough life to win with Aether Flux. That sounds pretty cool to me, so I decided to go for it and begin the loop until I hit Aether Flux Reservoir. Now with Aether Flux in my hand, I have 3 floating mana and can sacrifice Dwarven Runes to create 2 floating red mana for a total of 5 floating mana. I then cast Aether Flux, and nobody has a response, so it resolves, and with 1 floating mana, I return Greening Ignis and net 3 floating mana from its ability. Thanks to Birgi, I net an additional 1 mana. This allows for infinite cast, which feeds into Aether Flux ability and allows me to gain enough life to pew-pew the table. GG's all, that one hurt my brain box, and a huge shout out to the awesome Commander Paradise crew for heckin' helping me through that game. GG's. Oh man, talk about failing forward after that match. Like, I had to call out, I think I did it in the script, I can't remember, but like, Sensei's Divining Top, I had accidentally shuffled away into my library with like the Humbling Defactor, and then I also like discarded 2 like major like win cons. One I think was like the Helm of Awakening, which like discounts a lot of stuff, so I could have just had like free cast, and then the other one was like Cloudstone Curio or something like that. But like those are 2 major win cons in early game. I was like, to the graveyard with you.
Right. I mean, the fact that you were able to shuffle in the top and still get it off the top of your library.
Oh yeah. It's because there are so many wheels.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was impressive, and congratulations. It was a team effort, but you got there in the end.
Probably looked like I was just cheating on Moxfield the whole time. Just like, let me stack my deck. Oh yeah. Whoa, Sensei Divining Top just happened to be there.
You pulled it in from another window.
Yeah, like I had like 5 ready up on the screen. Oh man.
Oh man. So if there's anything we learned is you can too play cEDH. You just need some friends.
Yeah, you just need some help, some little buddies. I think the other hard part was like I hadn't read the primer or really looked at the deck list until like we went to go play the game. So I was like, what are my win cons? How does this deck work? So it was really nice playing again with Ryan and Tyler from Commander Paradise because they're good people and it was really fun playing with them.
Yes, and like we do every episode, we shout out what we consider the MVP card.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can't have a cEDH game without some good, powerful 1-mana creatures.
Some of you might hate them, and some of you might love them. Do you want to announce
them? They hit the battlefield. Oh, sorry.
You're okay.
When they hit the battlefield, the table quakes.
Shakes.
It's, of course, Spectral Sailor.
Yes, Spectral Sailor was our MVP card. And you thought it was Ragavan, didn't you? But no, I think... Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I keep jumping in on you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, having a low-costed flyer in a Yuriko deck just spells out trouble for anybody against it.
Oh,
Plus,
yeah.
It has some other ability that I don't even remember what that does.
Flying? I don't know. Or isn't it like you sacrifice it and it counters a spell or something?
You can counter a spell.
Yeah.
Blue mana.
But we thought like that, and then maybe some of the Lord of the Ring cards like really stood out. We didn't want to like say the MVP card was just like combo pieces because that feels like no duh. You know what I mean? But there's just some cool like stuff that was like outside of what you kind of expected for cEDH, or at least for me, because I don't think like in EDH really Spectral Sailor is like on my radar. Maybe Pioneer, but
I had it in the Pirates deck once, and it does upset the table.
it does the bonk.
More the counter, but yeah, that too.
That too. Yeah. Fear the bonk.
Yes.
And our little sailor didn't counter one spell. It was just there to bring out spooky ninjas. So
Right. And then it's just like a well-costed similar Regavan at that point.
one person's pirate is another person's ninja.
Mhm.
That was polite. Thank you. Oh man.
Anyways, if you have gotten this far, thank you again. Please let us know what you thought of the game, what you thought the format in general. Tell us if you played it. We would love to know, and I'm sure it's something we will dabble our feet in here and there again. I'm sure hopefully next time I'll be able to muster up the courage to play myself.
Maybe you can fail forward like me. Oh man. Thanks so much for watching, y'all.
Yes.
Hope you have a good one, and bye. Are you not waving? There you go. The TikTok, yes. Okay, bye for reals.